Hello listeners, I'm your speaker Casey and welcome to part 2 of this mini-series on Christian Science. In this second and final part, we hear about Lauren's writing, her recent publication, and life after Christian Science. For early access to full-length episodes that are ad-free, you can sign up to patreon.com/the Cult Vault to support the show from as little as £1 a month. Now, here is Lauren.
It's interesting because where some people might say that an overarching major religion like Christianity, like Catholicism, like Islam, like Judaism, etc., one of the 7, I think, big names, under that are numerous branches which have their own sects, which have their own groups, and so on. So Christian Science finds itself under the umbrella of Christianity. And the way that cult-like environments crop up are usually where typically men in roles of leadership will take their interpretations of their sect of Christianity, for example, and interpret it in their own way. And then through those interpretations, will use certain justifications through scripture to get more money from people, or to get more time from people, or more commitments, or
Right. Mary
whatever it
Baker Eddy
looks
was
like.
very innovative, right?
But
And
she's
she was
been
an
dead for
entrepreneur.
ages.
She's
Been
brilliant,
dead.
right? She wrote her own book, created her own publishing company, and then made the manual so you can't change anything. Also, there is at the time, right? So think of women and the role of women at the turn of the century. There was no birth control. There was no property ownership outside of marriage. Her own family life was pretty turbulent. She actually had a son who didn't even live with her. It's unclear if he was taken away or if she asked for him to live with the people that he was raised by. But so within Christian Science, there is a huge component of feminism, if you will, not maybe traditional like textbook feminism, but a value on women. So women are highly valued. Women are 100% able to be one of the readers, or usually they pick a man and a woman, not two women. But I'm sure with the dwindling memberships, I'm sure out there are churches who have two women as both of the readers. But in my experience, it was usually they tried to have one or the other, and it didn't really matter who was who. My mom was a reader for a while. I think she was the Bible reader. And so it's like a 3-year commitment. And Sunday school teachers can be women. Also, this is super interesting, right? So she redefines God and coined the phrase father-mother God. Father, mother, God. So growing up, like that actually was like a really beautiful, very much appreciated and revered portion of Christian Science. So sometimes at the end of these interviews, people ask, well, what was a positive takeaway? And so I'll just offer that up. Like, it has been slightly challenging to leave a group like this that does highly value women just as much as men and equates them really as equals in the religion. There's not a whole lot of like misogyny that I ever detected, and an equilibrium, so to speak, in marriage, other than the normal like social norms of that time period, like my grandparents versus my parents looks a little bit different. But this father, mother, God, like it made a lot of sense. And I still have yet to kind of parse that out today. Like now I see Catholics leaning on Mother Mary, Saint Mary, as their comfort, especially to women, and that piece of like, how do I align myself, or how do I see myself as created by God, but yet we think God is only male. So it was interesting. There's a section of Science and Health where she talks about like the qualities of the female and the qualities of the male. And like, I always really loved all of that because it added so much value and so much nuance to like, if you're going to believe in a God, like, and a God created all of us the way that we are, like he must understand me as a woman just like he would understand me as a man. So that's like a little bit of a hiccup, I feel like, with biblical Christianity. Like the evangelical strain, maybe they have a little trouble like figuring out where women fit, and that's where a lot of the the destructive groups out of the evangelical and fundamentalist Baptist and some of those, and then into the Mormon groups. And, they're so terrible to women. And just awful. And so I guess I can be, Christian Scientists are super good at being grateful. Like we were brought up with like this grateful practice that's sort of similar to like positive psychology. And there are good takeaways. You have those Puritan work values of like really applying yourself to your faith because you had to work at it. It was this mind exercise, so to speak, of like, wrapping your mind around the principles. It wasn't necessarily really to totally understand them, but it helped. And so that's where I got hung up. Like I took philosophy in college, freshman year, and you see all of the things that she pirated from Aristotle and Socrates and Hume and all of these great philosophers. And so I would bring my textbook into my Sunday school class and like give it to my Sunday school teacher. He actually liked it. We had all kinds of great discussions. But there are positives as well as negatives. So back to my story of how I got out. So John, my to-be husband at the time, is like, why do you need this extra doctrine, And he's obviously concerned for me. I had what I didn't know at the moment was a urinary infection, which if those go untreated, which it did for a week or more, I was writhing in pain on the bathroom floor. It got so bad to the point he said, I'm taking you to the ER. Like my mom is on duty. She's at the hospital. I'm taking you to the ER. So that was like the first time I'd ever had something not get resolved or healed. And I went in to the doctor. And so go to the ER was taken care of so well, and they get you on the IV drip with the antibiotics going and the pain medicine, and you're like a new person, and you have these beautiful angels of nurses who are loving on you. I had never been cared for like that before, because in Christian Science, even your own parents are not attentive to, they're it helps to use the word gaslighting just because people understand what that means. That I say I have a stomach ache, and you say, as my mother, you don't have a stomach ache. You're God's perfect child. God created you to be love, and you can embody God's goodness. And God didn't create matter. God didn't create disease. God didn't create sin. You're perfect, And so it's along those lines. So you might be cuddled or given a blanket, but the actual physical need that needs attention does not get attended to, if that makes sense. So it creates in you like this real sense of like neglect for the actual problem. So it's like, it's bizarre because you're not neglected in that your parent is not paying attention to you. You're neglected because they're not actually paying attention to the thing that needs to be attended to. They're attending to something different instead of the thing that actually is causing you pain. So to go and experience the ER, to get the medication, to go on antibiotics, to have that problem resolved in a very short amount of time was amazing. And you'll hear probably other Christian Scientists will chirp up, oh yeah, the first time I took a Motrin, which that also happened to me. I didn't share that, but a girlfriend, high school, why don't you just take Motrin for your cramps, And I think somebody along the way slipped me a Motrin, to try. And this is before all the one pill can kill terrible stuff. So we knew nothing of that. And it's true. A Motrin actually does help with menstrual cramps. It's amazing. So to go for my whole life trying to align my thought with these scientific principles to heal oneself and things not being healed, and then to actually get real medical care and to have the physical problem either be healed or have the pain alleviated, that is mind-blowing. And so that radically changed my course. It made me question whether Christian Science was, quote, the truth or not, because we were told that it was the truth, and even that the words that Jesus spoke, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. We were told that Mary Baker Eddy was the one that actually had the truth, not Jesus Christ. So, I mean, that's heretical on a number of different levels. But for me personally, it was pretty like earth shattering to all of a sudden feel like this truth that I was told worked, it didn't quite work, like wasn't true. So it set me off on a rabbit trail. I have a degree in English literature. I love research, and I'm a lifelong learner, and obviously now an author. 2 books out, so like it's in the fiber of my being to like research and ask questions. And so it just set me off, and I went to the library and checked out every book on cults that I could find. I came home with a huge stack, and this is, I'm skipping some steps. You'll have to grab my book over on Amazon. Leaving Christian Science is the name to read the full story. But when I started going through the books, and Walter Martin's Kingdom of the Cults was one of the books, which probably is not something you're just going to pick up off the shelf. It's written from an evangelical Christian point of view of like, these are the groups that are not Christian. And there's, a whole chapter on Christian Science. It blew my mind. Christian Scientists are information control. That's the I in the BITE model. We were encouraged not to read religious books outside of Christian Science published information. That's all pretty typical. We were encouraged, it wasn't disallowed to have friends who were not Christian Scientists, because there's so few of us. That means basically you wouldn't have any friends. But there was information control there. And certainly before the internet, we got a computer and the internet when I was like in high school. So most of my years, we didn't have access to that. So praise praise God now, right? You can just Google it. You can ask a question, and you can get on the internet, and you can find things so much more quickly. But for me, I had to stick with all the books in the library. And there was even a book by Latane C. Scott, and her book was Why We Left a Cult. So one of the cool things, talk about full circle. So on the back of my book, I self-published this book, and I went to some of the authors that were instrumental in me leaving Christian Science, and I went to them with this book when it was finished and asked if they would give me an endorsement. And so actually, Walter Martin had passed away, but his daughter, Jill Martin Rishi, runs his ministry still to this day. And she and I sort of became friends through this. And she gave me an endorsement on the back of my book. Josh McDowell is another Christian author who writes on cults and things, and their ministry also gave me a quote. And then Latane C. Scott, in her book, Why We Left a Cult, she came out of Mormonism. It was a book, a compilation of stories of people who left, like Jehovah's Witness and Mormon and Christian Science. But there's a story of a Christian Scientist in there. And so it impacted me in such a huge way to read someone's story. That's why I wrote this book. It's like, stories have this way of compelling people into the shoes of someone else that nothing else can. I mean, you talk to people all the time who have written their memoir, and it's incredible, right? The power of story to like draw you in, and you take a little piece of whatever each person's story, and you have a way of like, our minds can apply it to our own lives. We see each other in each other's stories. And so that's just a little bit of my story out.
That's what was so incredible about the book Leaving Christian Science, because it was not only an insight into your experiences, but an insight into so many other people's experiences. And the way that you conducted the Q&A section, where you would ask anonymous individuals what parts of certain people's stories stood out to them or struck a chord with them. And One of the overarching themes that I identified throughout the various different stories was that Mary Baker Eddy positioned herself higher than Jesus Christ. So it was all kind of praise to her as opposed to praise to Jesus Christ. And that's what a lot of people later on in life were not able to reconcile, of course, along with health problems a lot of the time. So what I was going to ask you was whether you can recollect any times in your life or in any of these stories where there were significant moments of confirmation bias, where somebody got extremely sick and they aligned their thoughts and everybody around them aligned their thoughts, and this person made a full recovery, which would only really exacerbate somebody's or would only feed somebody's faith in Mary Baker Eddy's teachings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's pretty much like the bedrock to how people are convinced that Christian Science is true, because there are so if I were to like proselytize to you as a Christian Scientist, I would tell you about the many documented healings that have happened. And there are books that are sanctioned by the Christian Science Church that document a lot of these stories and healings. Also baked in is the testimony meeting on Wednesday nights, where people are it's something you're brought up to do. And this maybe harkens a little bit. Mormons also have this very significant component of testimony, like bearing their testimony. But in Christian Science, it's a win if you can, pray about your headache, and then come Wednesday night, you go, your mom might say, "Oh, do you want to go to the Wednesday night testimony meeting and share about your headache, share about your healing," and so then that's a big bravado, something you can really feel really good about, that you overcame something and have something to report in the testimony meeting. Absolutely, Mary Baker Eddy is positioned above Jesus Christ. And actually, Jesus Christ is demoted to the highest, the way shower is one word she uses. So like the highest of human beings that ever walked the earth, that had many, many valuable teachings and good things to say, but didn't really have it all. Like, she says that she rediscovered the lost element of healing. So Jesus, healed many people. It wasn't always a physical healing. Yes, he healed blind, he healed the lepers, he brought Lazarus back to life. But what about the water? And the water turned to wine, the very first healing, or the very first miracle that Jesus performed, had nothing to do with physical healing. And so, that's made perhaps like a whole different story. And it's going to get me off track. But it still happens. There's a lot of power in, and there's studies that have come out about like positive psychology and positive thoughts and positive feelings to change your physical experience. And I'm seeing that kind of have a resurgence in the New Age community, or maybe it never went away. But one of the websites I edit is on the highly sensitive person trait. And I've noticed that a lot of people who are kind of in that empath, highly sensitive therapist or consultant kind of zone tend to put a lot of emphasis on like the positive mental state and being able to heal your body with your thoughts. So again, old things are repurposed. There is value in having like a positive attitude, right? Applying positive thoughts, saying positive things to yourself when you are feeling depressed, or you're having, like right now, I'm waiting to get hip surgery and I have a lot of hip pain throughout the day. And so I'm trying to use those skills that I've learned to be positive. But alongside that, I've also learned good self-care, which is not trying to go run 5 miles when my hip is screaming at me. That's something, if if I was still in Christian Science, I may still try to do the things that I normally did because I'm sort of ignoring those symptoms that my body is telling me. So there are still people who have healings and report that. And from a theological or spiritual point of view, sometimes Christians, people like those of us who've left Christian Science who align with like biblical or historical Christianity, we might posit that the enemy, Satan, the devil, whoever you want to call him, they do believe that, you know, the Bible says that he is a roaring lion. He's still out causing trouble. He's causing people to sin. That he is masquerading as a healing element. That somehow he's involved in these healings to keep people trapped in a false theology. So that is one frame of mind. Another explanation might be just that your positive thoughts caused you to be sort of healed, or cause your body to repair quickly. There's also like a lot of healings where it's like, I woke up and I had a fever, and I knew that I was God's perfect child. And 10 days later, I was all better. And thank you, God, for Christian Science. That might be a Christian Science test me. Did you miss the 10 days there? Like you were sick for 10 days and then you got better. Like that is the normal course of a cold or a flu. So there's a lot of like normal stuff that goes away on its own. If you didn't take NyQuil, you suffer through the night, but you're not going to die from it. You know what I mean? Dixie's story in my book about the measles epidemic at the Principia Christian Science College in the 80s, that one is particularly difficult, probably the most difficult story that I had to, I interviewed each of these people like on a Zoom and recorded it and then transcribed it and then craft. Dixie's story was particularly hard to put together just because of the dramatic physical symptoms that she was having and basically not getting any medical care at all because they were quarantined. And that's tough. I mean, I think we can all agree that it's tough to hear about people suffering when down the street is a hospital. I've read other memoirs, and there's a new memoir that I reviewed for one of the other Christian Science. It's called xchristianscience.com. It's another nonprofit helping people. It's very secular, so no, they reviewed my book, but they don't give any input on what religion you should go to. But this author, Peggy Cook, her book is called Released: Walking from Blame and Shame into Wholeness. She was born with club feet and into a Christian Science family. And so it tells her story of going through, her parents did try to get her treated and then called it quits halfway through when she was little. And so she didn't leave till she was in her 30s and kind of went back through the whole medical process to get her body fixed. And it's incredibly, incredibly moving. And the thread that I see through all of these stories, even stories that are not people out of Christian Science, but other cultic groups, are the resilience and the strength is something, if we could bottle it and sell it, it would make everybody $1 million, because the people, and I consider myself to be a strong and resilient person as well, but the people who come on your show and tell their stories, like, you don't have wimpy people who've succumbed to their life being torn apart and they're mentally unstable. Like, though they do exist, but those are not the people who show up here for these type of interviews and who write books. So I think it's safe to say that despite the trauma, which I have complex trauma from various things that have happened, despite the trauma and despite the harm, either through spiritual doctrine or through a person, involved in other groups, destructive groups, we are not going to let them take us down. We're going to stand up. We're going to stand up for what's right, which is proper care of children for medical issues, and not indoctrinating people into a specific set of beliefs with rigid guidelines. That's not okay. And that's like Steve Hassan's work is so amazing because he is able to spell that out very clearly. Like, these things are not okay. You don't know that when you grow up in a belief system that tells you certain things are not okay. So, I always encourage people to get like a psychological undergirding education under them, whether that's through self-help books or support group like FFCS. We have support groups for people who are former Christian Scientists or even questioning and they're not sure. They can jump in there, but they're not religious. They're just, we have a therapist in these support groups, and we walk through like a semester, kind of like a college semester, and there's a level 1, an 11th, level 2, and a level 3, and we walk through these support groups with people and hold hands. And the value in that is amazing because the shared experience is it's hard to put into words if you've had a really similar upbringing in a similar faith system. A lot can be done with that, like even more sometimes than regular therapy, where you're trying to explain to your therapist what happened to you and they just don't have a clue. So yeah, that resilience and strength, I think, is something that for me is probably the biggest takeaway. That wherever you're at with your faith journey, I'm all about journey. It's my author tagline, like journey together. I used to have God's journey together in it, and I strategically took out God's journey because I didn't want anybody to feel like if their journey didn't include God, or they didn't know what about God to include, they could still feel like they're with me. And in the opening of the book, Leaving Christian Science, I say, like, if you're reading this because you disagree, like, there's still a place for you here. Like, there's a place for each of us, a place for whatever point in the journey that we're on. But the journey that we're on together, I mean, it includes like looking around side to side and going, wow, you're really strong. Like, you made it through this experience. Like, you're resilient. That's like the people that I interviewed. I'm like, holy smokes, I guess I'm strong too. Like, I guess I made it through. And there's really nowhere to go but up. You have to write that down and remind yourself sometimes, because it often can feel like the way out, which I love. The UK, the signs and the bus stations and stuff. Do they still say way out instead of exit? I always love that about Narnia, all the Narnia movies. But
Yeah, most signs do. Yeah, way out. Yeah, thinking about it now. Yeah, I
yeah,
can.
and there's the hashtag, I got out, for people who have gotten out of cults. And so for me, that is a biggest piece of the journey, is like, what was your way out, or what is your way out, or what will be your way out? Because we're not meant to live in an oppressive group that determines all of these things. That's antithetical, I think, to human living, and we're not wired for that. So it's an aberration in how we're really supposed to be living. So anyway, if your experience or your way out includes a pivot to a belief in God, mine did. And it's not something that I feel like I was definitely taken on a journey and like pointed in that direction, and that's my own story. But for every story like mine, there's someone who is still questioning and still kind of circling the building, so to speak. And that's okay too. Like, it's a lot.
The comments about the bravery, the unwavering bravery of all of the guests that have appeared on this show is just, I mean, I don't know if it's the appropriate place to say this, but it's quite miraculous, really, I think. Every time I'm going through the editing process after an interview, there's just things that I am absolutely astonished with that perhaps I didn't take in fully the first time that the guest offered certain pieces of information to me. I just think every single person that's appeared on this show is incredible, and I always carry that with me when I'm feeling maybe a bit tired or maybe a bit burnt out. And then I listened back to another one of the episodes and I'm like, how could anybody ever, want to stop doing this work? I think it's absolutely amazing. And what you said about Dixie's story as well, I found that part of the book also particularly difficult, especially when it occurred to her that maybe she was on her own and nobody was visiting because she was contagious and people knew that if they came to her, they would also get sick, which kind of undermines the entire religion of Christian Science. So to have that epiphany when you're on your own and sick and lonely and quarantined was really quite a thing to read in that part of the book. But what really underpinned the whole book together was this common thread that everybody in the book that was interviewed or participated left Christian Science and found traditional Christianity. And what you said about everybody being on a different journey, me as an atheist reading that book didn't feel like I was being evangelized or proselytized to in any way whatsoever. I felt like I was just reading people's experiences of being in Christian Science and then finding traditional Christianity. And I think it's really important to point that out to people, that as somebody that is not religiously affiliated or spiritual in any way, that's not what my experience of reading the book was. I was moved by every individual story in the book and how different they were, but how there were small common things that were able to tie people's experiences together, that just says, we're all just human. And it was a very moving book, Leaving Christian Science. And I think it's also an incredible resource for anybody who has left a religious movement and feels like they still could be or perhaps are spiritual or Christian in some way, but they're not sure what that looks like. I think this is an incredible testament to how people were able to rekindle their faith in what they felt was the authentic truth and not the one that they'd been raised in. And it's given me goosebumps to say that. I just think it's incredibly important to highlight that fact, that there are still people that are extremely devout in their faith in a way that feels productive and healthy and beneficial to them, as opposed to lethal, perhaps.
That's really incredible the way that you articulated that, and I appreciate that a lot as an author, because I did have a moment, like after it was published, it was out there. I didn't share with my close family who are still Christian Scientists. I didn't share until it was like out there, and then I kind of gave them the heads up, which I know was very difficult probably for them, but I had to do it that way. I was afraid for a moment that that it would be too like heavy-handed on the faith part, like. And it's in the title, and all I can say is that I know what I believe for myself now, and I think that those that were interviewed, like, they share that. Like, it's just so hard. It's hard. I never liked, and I still don't like the kind of like baked in it's baked into the pie that if you are a Christian, you should be talking and sharing and speaking with your neighbors. And I I approach that for myself, that like all I can do is like I think I have it figured out for myself, like what I believe. And that is kind of the best that I can do. And so I can love you the way that I think I can care for you as a friend or family member, like the way that I feel like I'm taught in the Bible to care for people. Like all I can do is the very best that I know how to do. And if that doesn't tell you what I believe, I don't know. I don't know what else to do. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to shove anything down someone's throat. And so um, uh, I did pass the book to someone very influential who also is not atheist or agnostic, and had a different reaction than what your reaction was. And so that worried me. But to hear you like be able to read it, and did have a couple other friends who are not a specific religion read it, and they were able to glean out a few things that for them really help them process the experience of coming out of Christian Science. So that was my aim, and it's very hard to very hard line to toe. So thank you for your kind words there, Casey. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me on your show and all the good work that you're doing just to highlight these incredible stories, incredible, strong people.
I love it. I feel incredibly honored to be able to have these conversations and to also ask people where listeners should go to buy their books.
Yes, thanks so much for asking. So I have an author blog. It's just my name, Lauren Hunter, LaurenHunter.net. And you can go there and all the links to Amazon. You can also just go straight to Amazon if you want, or you can check out blog posts. I'm also a musician, and I like to write poetry. And my second book, which you can't see it, it's called Write Your Journey, a step-by-step guide to write your life story fast. So it was sort of a piggybacked on the idea of like helping people write their own story. That book isn't a Christian book or anything. So it just helps people kind of earmark the different themes and ways that they could put their own story together, whether it's a slice of their life, like their story of becoming a mom, or love story, or career journey, that type of thing. So yeah, I love this journey we're on together, and it's exciting to hear the different ways that people tap into that strength, that deep resonant strength within them. You never wish on anyone that they have to go there, they have to do that, but it is powerful to see that in action and to see the results when people do have to dig deep. And you think, gosh, maybe I can handle the next big hard thing too, because somebody else has done it.
Absolutely. I think that's a very poignant thing to wrap up our conversation today. And also just to mention that I will put all of those links in the episode description for anyone that's interested in getting their hands on a copy of Leaving Christian Science. And we'll aim to run it as one of the monthly memoir giveaways as well. So look out for that across social media platforms, because you might just get your hands on a free copy. And I do want to throw it out there as a recommendation to people, because it is a compilation of various people's testimonies, and it's incredibly moving stuff, and also details Lauren's personal experience in Christian Science as a Christian Scientist and now former Christian Scientist. So it will add a bit more context and information around, mother church visits at age 17, 18 and that sort of thing. So yeah, if anybody would like to know a little bit more about that, then they can head on over to grab a copy of the book. So thank you so much, Lauren, for your time today. Thank you for highlighting the strength and bravery of all of the people that have appeared in your book, all of the guests that have been on this show, and of yourself as well. And I'm so glad that we're able to sit here and celebrate you and your resilience and your strength and bravery, and just to say thank you so much for your contribution to understanding cults and adding to the world of cultic studies. I really, really appreciate you and your time today.
Thank you so much, Casey. It's been awesome. So thank you for the conversation.
Take care, Lauren. Have a great day.
That is the end of this mini-series on Christian Science. To find out more about Lauren's work, you can follow the links in the episode description. To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.